When Erin Dusty Dustman left for work that morning, it was a strange day at the end of a strange week. It had been a strange week overall. There was a tension in the air that he was unable to adequately explain. From the moment his wife informed him about the party a week ago, it had been growing from a vague nibbling in the back of his mind over the course of the past week. If someone had asked him to explain it, he would not have been able to do so. It wasn't even a coherent thought, and he didn't even consciously put his mind to it, but he felt unsettled and disquieted, almost as if he was subtly waiting for the other shoe to drop. He didn't even put his mind to it. It was nothing more than a sensation, but it caused him to feel anxious and jittery throughout the entire day. He made an effort to concentrate while he was at work. The truth of the matter is that he had no desire to attend the party. There was never a time when he enjoyed attending any of his wife's office parties. He thought to himself, effing smug-ass lawyers, they all think their doesn't stink, and he proceeded to think this. Dusty, you are not allowed to skip a Christmas party at the office. During the time that he was attempting to beg off, he recalled that his wife insisted that it simply wouldn't be good. Without a doubt, he would comply with the wishes of his wife. At all times, he complied with his wife's wishes. As Dusty was winding down his week and closing his computer, he took a moment to look at the photograph of his two sons that had been taken during a fishing trip the previous year. His smile was very bright. It appeared that the only bright spot in his home life over the past few months was the relationship he had with his sons. To accommodate an accident that occurred in the right-hand lane of the highway, traffic was slowed down approximately halfway through the journey home. In the course of his drive, Dusty came to the realization that he was so preoccupied with his own thoughts that he was not even aware of the precise location he was in. Dusty arrived home approximately 15 minutes later than he normally would have because of the accident. Dusty knew that the only thing he was going to get from his wife was a snide comment when he walked in the door. This was in contrast to the customary welcoming kiss that he had received from his wife. In no way did she let us down. It's not like you couldn't get home on time for once, Tracy complained to her husband. Now get changed into your grey pinstripe suit, that's my favorite. Dusty shook his head in a silenced manner. He contemplated donning his dark blue suit, which he believed to be more authoritative than other options. He had a tendency to blend in more with the background, despite the fact that the grey suit was nice. It was absolutely not in his nature to blend in with the crowd when he was in the presence of these individuals. During the holiday season, James Fielding, the newest partner in Chicago's most prominent criminal law firm, was in charge of hosting the annual holiday party for the firm in his spacious northern neighborhood home. Dusty was able to sense Tracy's mood becoming increasingly tense as they had entered the room. It was always a sign that she was feeling stressed out because her eyes were blinking nervously and she was talking very quickly. At the moment when they arrived at the entrance to what seemed to be a sizable entertainment area, Tracy's hold on his arm became more firm. She then pulled him to the side, pressed him against the wall, and wrapped him in her arms. "What exactly is going on, Tracy?" he questioned. "Is there something wrong?" "No, I just wanted to say," she began, but Dusty cut her off in the middle of her sentence. "What?" he wanted to know, perplexed. "The fact that you are aware of my love for you is something that I have always had, and I would like you to keep in mind that it does not matter what happens tonight between us. Nothing will ever be different in the future. Let me just remind you that everything is going well for us. Although it may come as a surprise to you, I am aware that you do not like these individuals. However, as long as you keep this fact in mind, there will be no change in our relationship." "You are going to be fine," she assured me. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Dusty claimed. "I have no idea." "You are absolutely correct, I do not belong with all of these lawyers and high-powered jerks, but what makes me different from them? Despite the fact that I have never found these events to be enjoyable, I will continue to put up with them as I have in the past. Just keep in mind that everything is fine," she said. After taking a few steps back, she retreated from him and allowed him to step into the room. In front of a large bar that featured a painting of a naked woman lying on a bed, Fielding was holding court where the painting was displayed. Dusty moved to the side of the bar to receive a glass of white wine for Tracy and a glass of scotch for himself. he nodded to Fielding as the two of them shared a brief moment of eye contact prior to his departure. In response, Fielding gave Dusty a sneering look and nodded his head. That was a look that Dusty detested. If anything, he wasn't entirely certain that he didn't despise Fielding as well. After obtaining the 2 glasses, Dusty started moving in the direction of Tracy, who was heading in the direction of Fielding and his group. Tracy had positioned Dusty in such a way that his back was facing the bar. He positioned himself on the periphery of the group. Tracy made her way over to Fielding, who greeted her with a courteous kiss on the cheek before returning to his ramblings about something else. Dusty, who was positioned on the periphery of the conversation, was honestly not paying attention to what was being said. After taking a few quick glances around, he took another quick look at the naked painting and thought to himself that it was appropriate for Fielding to have a naked painting that was so prominent in the room. As Dusty refocused his attention on the room, he had the impression that he saw a number of people looking in his direction. Immediately, he looked down at his suit to determine whether or not he had accidentally spilled something on himself, or, heaven forbid, whether or not his fly was open. Although he did not observe any spills, a careful inspection of his fly revealed that it was already up. Despite this, the looks continued, and Dusty, who was feeling uneasy, turned back toward the bar while taking a quick glance toward the painting. Dusty pondered the painting and thought that it was extremely sexual. On a bed, the stunning woman with raven hair was lying naked and glassy-eyed. It was clear that she had just finished having what seemed to be very satisfying sexual encounters. The look on her face was one that he was all too familiar with. As he stood next to him, he was acutely aware that the woman depicted in the painting was standing right there. Dusty ceased his thoughts, and for that matter, he also immediately stopped breathing. Standing with his mouth agape, he gazed intently at the painting. It went unnoticed by him that Fielding and his wife were smiling at each other. Over time, other people in the room began to turn their attention to Dusty, with some of them smirking and others showing signs of pity on their faces. Dusty gathered himself together and whispered to his wife, "That's you." This realization came after what seemed like an eternity but was probably only 10 seconds. By the time Dusty had finished staring at the painting, the entire room had fallen into complete silence, and the volume of his whispered exclamation was so loud that it could have been mistaken for a scream. "No," Tracy uttered in a low voice. "That woman has black hair, and I have auburn." "Silly." She let out a barely audible chuckle, which only served to make her disclaimer appear even more implausible. A number of individuals looked from Tracy to the painting and then back again, and a number of additional individuals were secretly laughing. Tracy received a momentary wink from Fielding. Following a brief glance in the direction of his wife, Dusty returned his attention to the painting. He spoke with a voice that was almost catatonic, and he said, "Black hair but auburn pubic hair. It is your pubic hair." Tracy engaged her gaze intently on the painting. The fact that the painter had not changed her pubic hair to black like he had done with her hair was something that she had not noticed before, despite the fact that she had seen the painting before. She quickly pondered whether or not that had been done on purpose or if it had been an error. Tracy was under the impression that it was not really that important. Dusty would eventually realize that the painting was of her, but she and Fielding had anticipated that it would be later in the evening, after he had been intoxicated by a few drinks. Dusty would eventually figure out that the painting was of her. Neither one of them had anticipated such a sudden disclosure. Suddenly, Dusty was seized by 2 sets of powerful hands that grabbed him by the shoulders and arms. In a hurry, he was moved from the main room to a smaller room that was located off to the side. 2 seconds later, Fielding and Tracy came in second place. The smaller man was treated with a sneering attitude by Fielding. "Listen up, you nerdy little thing. From now on, things are going to continue in this manner. When I'm not using your wife, you get to keep her and your home life," Fielding said. "Your wife is going to be my slave, and then you get to keep her. Fight this, and the firm will represent Tracy and take everything you have, and I'll still be screwing her." Between Fielding and his wife, Dusty looked back and forth between the two of them. It was as if he were confined, both literally and figuratively. "This has been going on for quite a while now, and you never had a clue," Tracy further elaborated. "So, you have not lost anything." Absolutely nothing is going to be altered by us. The relationship between you and I is going to continue as it has in the past, and I will continue to see Jim. In the event that we divorce, I will take half of everything that we own and continue to see Jim without interruption. It is up to you to decide. The majority of my friends and co-workers are already aware of this. The only people who are still in the dark about it are the boys and your friends, and you are the only one who knows. Simply put, this is all about your ego. What I mean is that we can continue to be husband and wife with all the implications that comes along with that, or else why would I ever want to sleep with you again? Dusty gave his response. You are putting him in a hole. You have made it abundantly clear that I am merely an afterthought. When it comes to James Fielding's 304, I'm not going to take any casual seconds. Dusty, do you feel better now? What should you do now that you have the opportunity to call me? Your intention is to accuse me of having cooties, right? It's amazing how accurate he was about you. The sound of Fielding's laughter reverberated throughout the room as Dusty was being led out of the room and then the house. You are just a little man, Fielding repeated. The laughter was heard by Dusty as he was leaving. Just barely, he was able to choke back his tears. Did you see the look on Hub's face when he saw that painting, crowed Fielding to Tracy. You do know that he's smart enough to figure out when that was done, at least. Yeah, I guess I'm going to have to apologize to him, but when he practically accused me of cheating, I guess I figured I needed to get back at him somehow. The painting was a great idea, Jim, but you were cheating on him at that point, Fielding laughed. Tracy followed Dusty out, figuring she would need to calm her husband. In truth, Dusty had questioned his wife several times in the past year when things didn't quite add up, but each time Tracy had gotten on her high horse about her husband not trusting her. That argument had successfully backed down Dusty, who felt bad that he questioned his wife of 27 years. As the two drove home, Dusty reflected back on Tracy's 12-year career with the Scott Hansen LLC. After staying home raising the couple's two sons until they had gone to school, Tracy decided she wanted to go back to work. At first, she was assigned to Old Man Hansen, the firm's senior partner. But when Hansen retired 3 years previously, he was replaced by 35-year-old Fielding, a 6 feet 4 inches 220 pounds Hulk who made 47-year-old Tracy nervous by the way he looked at her, she admitted. Despite that, she chattered on about her new boss for the first 2 months, then suddenly went radio silent. Dusty knew that Tracy could still turn heads with her long hair and amazing curves. He still thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever met and often wondered how he had gotten lucky enough to land the prize. Not that Dusty was an ugly dweeb, he was only 5 feet 9 inches but a solid 170. He was quiet by nature and analytical, typical traits most people would associate with accountants, which he, in fact, was. When Dusty found out that Tracy's new boss was a large, handsome younger guy, he figured he would try to keep track of his wife's comings and goings. Tracy didn't work late with Fielding any more than she had with the old man, at least until about a year ago. Then the late night started increasing, before a week-long trip to New Orleans with Fielding for some kind of legal symposium. Dusty wasn't happy that Tracy had to make the trip, but he understood that as his admin, there were going to be times that she would have to make trips. He still put in his 2 cents with his wife, at which point she loudly accused him of not trusting her, despite the two being married for more than 25 years. No longer in the Christmas spirit when he got home, Dusty poured himself a single malt scotch and practically staggered over to his favorite lazy boy. It's not every day when your life turns to in a matter of minutes, he cried like a baby for the next 5 minutes. At least until this past year, Dusty thought he had the perfect marriage. Then the little cracks seemed to show up, although at first, he didn't want to see them. Then his wife denied that those cracks even existed. Dusty had to admit that aside from working late and the trip to New Orleans, things between the pair had seemed pretty normal. The sex hadn't suddenly ramped up or been cut off. He had noticed, though, that his wife's wardrobe seemed to get younger and sexier, and lately, her attitude toward him had turned. Dusty drank several single malts and finally drifted off to sleep in his chair while watching the classic Christmas movie It's a Wonderful Life. Tracy finally woke him at 1:45 a.m. to try to get him to sleep in the couple's bed. I've got to admit, I didn't see that coming, Tracy. Not sure I'd ever want the boys to see that painting, though, Dusty commented dispassionately. Tracy blushed deeply. From the look on her face, Dusty realized that she hadn't considered her children when she posed for the portrait. Dusty was barely able to keep himself from lashing out at his wife physically. She would never know that her deceased father-in-law's teaching had probably kept her out of the hospital. When he collected himself, Dusty unveiled his fists. Tracy saw the movement, and her eyes got wide. A chill of realization came over her that she perhaps pushed her husband to the edge. Well, since we're being so open and honest, how about answering 2 questions for me, why and for how long? Dusty asked. Tracy studied the pile of the carpeting for a few seconds while her face changed expressions. We didn't mean for this to happen, it just did. About a year ago, we found we had a lot in common. You and I had gotten stale. Jim's a take-charge kind of guy, and he kind of took charge of me. I liked it. I liked it a lot. And then when you sort of accused me of cheating, I got mad, and Jim and I came up with a way for me to get even. But you were already cheating. That's not getting even, that's rubbing my face in it. Dusty looked up at her like he was going to reply, then put her head down silently. So what you're telling me is that you opted for new, young, exciting over same old, same old. What we had for all those years didn't mean anything to you, Dusty said. I still love you, Dusty. I'm just not in love with you anymore. Jim and I connect on so many levels, and it's new and exciting. Of course, it is. You bimbo. You're a new piece of meat to him, and he's a new stick to you. You haven't gone through the rigors of everyday life with him, raised children with him, come home and done daily chores. And what's with that picture, that painting? You would never have let me take a risque cell phone photo of you, but you POS, naked and well-drilled for some painter so Mr. Wonderful can hang you in plain sight in his home and everybody can see what a beautiful 304 you are. Tracy blushed deeply again. She started concentrating on her shoes. Dusty kept his eyes on her, and she eventually looked up. It was very exciting being naked in front of another man right after having sex with Jim, knowing that he was recording our lovemaking for everyone, Tracy admitted. Did you screw the painter too? Dusty blurted out. Well, once after my last posing session. Jim and I thought we owed him one after teasing him for most of the week. Of course, fair is fair, Dusty snarked. After a few minutes of awkward silence, Dusty asked, Did you forget about the boys? The boys? What do they have to do with this? Tracy asked back. This has nothing to do with the boys. They're out of the house now and have their own lives. You don't see breaking up our family as having no impact on the boys? You're not going to break up our family. You don't want any more people than necessary knowing you are a... Tracy ridiculed. Besides, I know you love me. Give me this for a little while, and after this, it can be me and you again, just like always. I overestimated you all these years, Dusty said. First, I thought you loved me as much as I loved you. Second, I thought you were fairly smart. Tracy pulled a face when Dusty finished his last statement, so he figured he should elaborate for her. Tracy, a no-fault divorce does not mean there is no one at fault. It just means the state doesn't want to screw around with trying to find fault and splitting assets. I am not afraid to tell the world that I am because you are an unfaithful 304. What do you think the boys are going to say to that? Tracy stammered, she stuttered, finally, she choked out, you wouldn't watch me, which you would ruin my relationship with my boys to get back at me, you scumbag, she hissed. No, not to ruin your relationship, but to accurately tell my side of the story, you witch. The truth hurts, doesn't it? Dusty said, confident when the confrontation started. Tracy looked defeated as she whispered, Can't we discuss this further? I'm afraid not, Tracy. You had sex with him in his bed, now you get to lie in it. Besides, what have I ever done to give you the impression that I would put up with you screwing another guy? Both of the couple's sons were shocked to hear their father's news when he called them the next day. Are you sure, Dad? That doesn't sound anything like Mom. Robbie, the couple's oldest, said when Dusty called him first. She and lover boy even had a painting done showing her after sex. It was hanging above his bar. The two of them and the rest of their staff thought it was great fun, Dusty said. "No, that's ridiculous," Robbie shouted over the phone. Mike, 2 years younger, listened quietly to Dusty's whole story before commenting, "Wow, Dad, what the hell did you do to piss Mom off? She would never have done something like this without being provoked." Dusty sat silent for a few seconds, trying to figure out exactly how to respond to his disbelieving son. "I think I let her down after all these years." He was younger, bigger, more forceful, and basically someone new and different. "I'm not buying it, Dad, sorry," Mike said. "Believe what you want, Mike. She shat on me, and I'm not going to take that." Tracy was served a week later. She tried to fight it, tried to get the judge to agree to marital counseling. It seemed like the judge was leaning in her favor until Dusty asked her to explain about the naked painting of her hanging in James Fielding's home. The judge looked shocked at Dusty's pronouncement. "Seriously?" he asked Dusty. "Naked and well satisfied from the looks of things, Your Honor, in another man's house," Mrs. Dussman, Tracy, started to answer the judge when her attorney put his hand on her arm to stop her. "Better to keep quiet rather than telling the judge you were a smug, stupid after cheating on your husband," he whispered to her. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized, with everything split 50-50. As the house was sold as part of the settlement, Tracy moved in with her lover, while Dusty moved into a small apartment near his place of employment. Jim Fielding had just finished pouring himself a single malt at his bar when he glanced at the painting of his lover, Tracy Dussman. He remembered how much fun it was to have Tracy pose for that painting after the pair had sex several times, with her face showing how freshly drilled and satisfied she was. Her husband was starting to catch on to the fact that she was having an affair, and the two lovers decided to beat him to the punch and rub his face in the affair. Both were sure that her quiet, unassuming husband would buckle to the new arrangement. But if not, Tracy would take half of Dusty's assets, and Jim would continue to enjoy her body. The divorce was a little over a year ago, but lately, things between Tracy and Fielding had seemed strained. She seemed to be getting clingier, although Jim had always made it clear to her that marriage was not on the table. A little more than a year and a half into their relationship, Tracy had noted that the heat of her affair had cooled, along with the actual sex. At least with Dusty, she could count on 27 years of loving affection, little touches, little caresses. She began to understand that the only thing love and lust have in common is the first letter of both words. 6 months later, Tracy moved into her own small apartment after she and Jim Fielding called it quits. 1 week after that, she was reassigned to be the admin for one of the newer attorneys. She knew the reassignment was coming, but the money and benefits stayed the same, so she actually welcomed the change. Her new direct boss was a handsome young graduate of Georgetown Law School with the attitude of a hotshot attorney on the way up. Tracy thought, she wondered to herself if the attitude came with the Juris Doctor degree. It took all of 2 weeks before Mr. Hotshot put his lips gently to Tracy's. She promised herself she wasn't going to allow him to get to her, but she apparently lied to herself. 6 weeks after beginning work for the new guy, 52-year-old Tracy had her ankles over the 31-year-old lawyer's shoulders as he pounded her in his bed. "Did I tell you that 304 was a hell of a good one?" Fielding asked the young attorney a couple of weeks later. "That painting over your bar was just a tease." "She is awfully good," Mr. Hotshot agreed. "Got rid of that painting," Fielding said, donated it to a fancy-ass strip club near here for $5,000 cash. The strip club is located approximately an hour away. "I am going to deduct the entire purchase price of $15,000 from my taxes." Both of the attorneys laughed in a conspiratorial manner. The Playpen was not the kind of place that Dusty would have normally found himself on a Friday night. However, when Jerry Kubak, the best man for his oldest son, was planning the bachelor party, he decided that it was necessary to invite Dusty out of respect for him. He estimated that the older man would remain for the required amount of time, and then leave before things got to the point where they were getting intense. Following a check at the door to ensure that they had the appropriate identification, the group of 15 people arrived at the upscale club in Massachusetts. When they reached the main part of the club, they turned into a corridor and continued their journey. The message was displayed on the wall just prior to their entrance into the open main room. Jerry, who was serving as the evening's host, was the first person to notice it. "Oh my God, take a look at that part. It's possible that I've never seen a prettier painting in my entire life than that one." Willie Ayler, another one of Robbie's groomsmen, yelled out, "After I'm done with them, all of my women have that look." "Holy, it can't be!" Jerry yelled as he came to a stop, having just finished reading the name tag that was attached to the photograph. Jerry fell silent, but Willie read the tag aloud for the entire group to hear. He did not even give any thought to what he was looking at the time. "Thou shalt not covet." I heard Willie yell. "Tracy Dustman, as depicted in the painting by Emile Galtier." "Robbie, you should know that she shares the same name." Willie fell silent as soon as he became aware of what he was reading. Those who were still in the group moved forward in order to read what was written on the card. In the process of reading the card and looking at the painting, Robbie's face turned completely white. Almost instantly, he turned around and looked first at his father and then at his younger brother. The expression on Mike's face became red, and Dusty shrugged. "Been there, seen that," Dusty said to both of the boys as he continued to walk alongside them. The sons fixed their gazes on one another. On one side of the stage, there were 3 tables where they and the rest of the party had gathered themselves. They were all waiting for Dusty to provide an explanation. "Your mother and her scum-sucking attorney lover were the ones who informed me that she was cheating on me. This is how they delivered the news to me." At his home, this was hung on the wall behind the bar that he had installed. Although it did not have a card on it, I was immediately aware of what I was looking at and who it was supposed to be. To make her look more adorable, they had the painter dye her hair black, but I was able to identify the person immediately. The event took place at a Christmas party held at his residence, and it appears that all of the employees at the law firm were aware that they had been swindling and had witnessed the painting. Both your mother and her scum-sucker thought it was hilarious when I found out about our relationship. "I don't know how the painting got here," said the father. "You have to convince them to take that down, because that belonged to Mom." It was Mike who begged his father. "I'll go talk to the manager, but when I first told you about what she was doing several years ago, you didn't seem to concern yourself too much with what she was doing." Mike appeared to be embarrassed as the majority of the group looked at him with an accusatory expression on their faces. "I seem to recall you wondering what I did to make her mad at me," Mike said. He pleaded with his father, "Please, Dad, take action." Among the members of the group, Dusty appeared to be the most composed. He rose in a stealthy manner, made his way to the bar, and inquired about speaking with the manager. Before Dusty returned to the group, there was a lot of gesticulating and some raised voices. The group was mostly sitting quietly, which is in contrast to what the majority of groups like that do when they are at a strip club. According to the manager, the owner of the club purchased the painting from a private individual, and it has proven to be a well-liked addition to the establishment. Dusty stated, "If I want to get rid of it, I can buy it for $10,000. I told him I had no inclination to spend 10 grand on an erotic painting of my cheating, her ex-wife." "Dad," both Robbie and Mike wailed. When that point arrived, the evening's activities had come to an end. When Dusty's sons returned to Chicago, they did not waste any time and went straight to their mother's apartment upon their arrival. Dusty returned to his own apartment and proceeded to sleep like a baby again. When Tracy sat down in the row of the groom's parents a few minutes before the wedding was scheduled to begin, she appeared to be in a terrible state of mind. Dusty was prepared for the fact that she would spend several hours explaining to his sons a neurotic nude postmost koal painting that was displayed on the wall of a strip club. He thought he had guessed correctly. Dusty made a sarcastic remark to his ex-wife as she sat down in the church pew a few feet away from him. "Last night wasn't too awkward," Dusty said. "Did you know Scumsucker sold that painting?" The answer she gave was, "Not until last night, I didn't," while she broke out in a furious blush. Due to the fact that they had divorced 5 years prior, the former spouses had hardly ever been seen together in public. Despite the fact that Trace's eyes were red and teary, Dusty had no choice but to acknowledge that she still looked good. Following the conclusion of the ceremony and the mother-son dance, Tracy established herself as a popular dance partner at the reception, particularly among Robbie's friends. As a result of her conversation with Robbie and Mike the previous evening, she was aware of the reason why, and she was ready to respond appropriately when several of the individuals in their 20s attempted to pull her in too close or let their hands wander. "There was a time when you would have put a stop to this pretty quickly," she said to Dusty when she returned to the table after dancing with her fifth handsy partner. They had been dancing together for a while. "At one point in time, you were the focus of my concentration. At this point, I believe the concern is solely yours. But if I recall correctly and if the rumor mill is correct, you have a preference for young people. Just for the sake of the boys, please make an effort to be somewhat discreet tonight." At the same time that Tracy's face displayed signs of irritation, she did not utter a single word. Since she had divorced, she had almost all of her sexual encounters with men who were younger than her own age. She was aware of this fact. Her sons were younger than she was. She simply did not understand how her ex-husband was also aware of this information. Tracy was unable to avoid noticing her ex-husband out of the corner of her eye when she was not dancing and was instead seated at the table with Dusty and several other members of her family. It was brought to her attention that the past 5 years had been favorable for him, with the only changes that were discernible being the appearance of a few lines on his face and the graying of approximately half of his hair. In spite of the passage of time, his blue eyes continued to be as penetrating as they had always been, and the line of his jaw was just as striking as it had been when the two of them had first met. "Oh God, I do not know why I left this man. A little bit more sexual activity? A tad more aggressive sexual encounters?" The thought that crossed Tracy's mind was, "ARF, what an idiot." When Tracy's sister whispered in her ear, "Yeah, sis, you blew it big time," Tracy was startled out of her reverie and forced to come to her senses. Hannah, her sister, was the recipient of her words. "Tell me I just didn't say that out loud," she said. Hannah responded in a low voice, "No, but the looks you've been giving Dusty haven't been too subtle." Hannah laughed lightly before continuing. "While we are all seated here, you might as well just ask him to screw you silly without any further explanation. To be more specific, I would like you to not screw me silly but rather to make slow, passionate love to me like we used to do, and then afterward, we would cuddle together. Not a single person has done that to me since we broke up." Hannah responded, "Perhaps if you asked him in a gracious manner, because after all, Dusty is the kindest person in the entire world." In the event that he had been questioned, the most affable individual in the world would have admitted that he still loved his ex-wife, at least to some degree. On the other hand, he was also astute enough to realize that he would never trust Tracy again, and that he would never be able to recover from the betrayal that she had committed with Fielding. After his divorce, Dusty did not even make an effort to date for the first year after the breakup. Over the course of the subsequent few years, he came to the realization that the number of single women significantly outnumbered the number of single men in his age range. This was despite the fact that there were a number of women in his workplace who revealed that they would be open to his advances once they discovered that he was a single man. The challenge was not in finding dates, rather, it was in overcoming his trust issues within the relationship. Dusty did, in fact, wake up in his apartment the morning after the wedding with a stunning blonde named Kristen Alfred. Kristen was seated at the table that belonged to the Alfred family, and she was watching a number of young men dance and grope the mother of the groom. It seemed as though she was constantly switching her gaze between the dancing and Dusty's reaction to it, or more accurately, his lack of reaction to it. She, along with the majority of the other guests at the wedding, had heard the story of Robbie's parents, and she was attempting to determine the extent to which Robbie's handsome father continued to feel love for his ex-wife. Having made the observation that Dusty was not carrying a torch for his ex-girlfriend, Kristen made her way over to the family table of the Dustmans and inquired of the Dustman patriarch whether he would be interested in dancing. When Dusty first laid eyes on her, she was greeted by the sight of a stunning blonde woman who stood 5 feet 2 inches tall and had long legs. She was dressed in a dark blue dress that ended at the middle of her thighs and appeared to be tailored to her every curve. As soon as he noticed that she did not have any rings on her left hand, he broke into a grin and got up from his seat. As a result of Tracy's passion for dancing, Dusty had begun taking dance classes at an early stage in their marriage and had become quite skilled on the dance floor. These two made a very dashing appearance. As Aunt Kristen drew closer to them, they even managed to engage in some conversation while the slow songs were playing. Following that, Dusty did not consume an excessive amount of time at the family table of the groom. In the moments when they were not dancing, he and Kristen were seen sitting together at the table reserved for the bride's family, and their gazes appeared to be fixed solely on one another. Upon further investigation, he discovered that Kristen, who was 52 years old at the time, had been divorced from an abusive husband for 20 years and had taught high school approximately an hour away from Chicago. If you don't mind me asking, how does a beautiful woman like yourself stay on the market for 20 years? Dusty inquired about it. She responded in a matter-of-fact manner, I don't just jump into bed with any man, and I have major trust issues for one. Dusty, who was smiling, then said, good answer. Dusty and Kristen began working together to address the trust issues that either of them had. It was approximately a year later when they awoke the following day to find that there had been a second wedding, which included the families of Dustman and Alfred. Robbie volunteered to serve as the best man for his father. Michael Dustman, a special agent with the Internal Revenue Service, was responsible for ensuring that James Fielding was audited for a period of 12 years in a row. As a result, the attorney will have to pay more than $1 million in additional taxes and fines. Fielding arrived at the IRS building for his 12th consecutive audit a few minutes late. His accountant was already inside the building when he arrived. Fielding was aware that with the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, somebody must have targeted him. However, he had so many adversaries that the list was lengthy, and he did not have the time to investigate each and every one of them. While Fielding was making his way toward the building, he had the thought, these IRS bozos were costing him a lot of money. In the event that he ever discovered the person who had ratted him out, he would have to pay a price in hell because he was James Fielding, and nobody ever bothered him. The man, who was wearing a baseball cap and dark sunglasses, reached out with his left hand as he and Fielding passed each other. He was pretty much inside his own head at the time, and he wasn't paying complete attention to his surroundings. A split second after Fielding felt the pain in his testicles, he collapsed to the ground. He had hardly heard the crackle of the stun gun. Fielding had been in excruciating pain. It was a quick kick that landed on his nose, which caused it to break, and another one that landed on the side of his jaw caused his head to snap back. There was another one that landed on the front of his face before he could even begin to feel the pain. After that, the attacker moved closer to his legs, and Fielding was able to see him raise his knee. However, even before he could move, the knee came down, and he was immediately overcome with a sharp pain that spread throughout his entire body, sending him into a world that was pitch black. While he was walking, Robbie smiled and put the weapon back into the pocket of his hoodie. He then removed 3 teeth that had become embedded in his shoe and continued walking. Hello, listeners. I would appreciate it if you could share your thoughts in the comments section. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe at the same time.